I'm delighted to stand here in front of you to open our second day of ICTERI 2025, which will start with the great keynote given by Mariana Romanyshyn, who is an outstanding person without being too modest. Mariana is an area lead at Grammarly. Everyone knows Grammarly. I can't say that everyone likes Grammarly, but not the company. I'm just about the software. I'm just dreaming about removing this ugly software from my laptop. And this is why I'm handing my laptop today to Mariana to use it for the presentation and enjoy her Grammarly software on my laptop. So the presentation and the talk will be on evolution, how Ukrainian as a language and Ukraine as a country evolved in natural language processing from something under the roots in terms of the quality and quantity up to the recognized phenomena. Mariana, the floor is yours, and please enjoy it.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, I'm very honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me, Vadim. And today I will be talking about the Ukrainian NLP, which is my passion and which is what I've been working on for the past years. Okay, let's see whether it works. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so a couple of words about me. I'm a computational linguist with 15 years of experience, and the past 11 years I spent working at Grammarly, building the error correction and text improvement software that you use. So every time you see a card that says you missed an article or something like that, that's my team working. I'm happy the software can help you reach your goals. I'm also the general chair of the Ukrainian Natural Processing Workshop. For the past, chair for the past 3 years. I'm an active member of the Lang UK organization that is working on building open data and tools for Ukrainian language processing. I supervise thesis at the Faculty of Applied Sciences at the Ukrainian Catholic universities, and my master students also do their work in the area of Ukrainian natural language processing. And I'm a member of the expert committee on the development of AI. So wearing like a lot of hats, and also my mom of my 4-year-old. So that's my most important job, of course. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the motivation first. With the so the motivation about why I do language processing, the evolution, like what we reached in the past 10 years, a couple of words about the UNLP workshop, and of course we'll talk about large language models for Ukrainian, which should be interesting for all of you that are trying to integrate AI to the educational processes. This will give you more insights about what is possible and what is not possible right now in models to speak Ukrainian. A couple of disclaimers. This presentation is intentional for better perception. This presentation contains 81 hyperlinks, and I hope that it can be shared with all the participants of the workshop after the workshop. And if you cannot find any of the research that I will be talking today, feel free to reach out to me. Open science tools, like everything should be to the community to work to build upon and to integrate in the tools. And this presentation has a lot of lists because I'm a huge fan of lists. So let's dive into the motivation. Let's talk about language, okay, first. So why do we need language? Obviously, we use language to exchange information, but also to express our feelings. We think using language. We try to influence other people using language. So requests. We build social connections using language. Right? We can just wave, of course, but we also like say hi and thank you, and we express a couple of sentences and so on. So at the beauty of to also performs this aesthetic function for us, right? But not any language do that, right? So I'm now speaking English, and it can actually perform all these functions in languages. Why do you want to develop tourism in languages? And that is because each language has a set of unique concepts, and these concepts are non-translatable. These concepts are not transferable to other languages. And these concepts have evolved and evolved under the impact of surroundings where this language was developing. And this language starts impacting our mindset and the way we think. It becomes part of our culture and our historical memory, which is also about safety. For years since the appeared on Earth, to differentiate between friends and foes, between members of your groups of other groups. And all of these concepts and ways of thinking that language has, they become like part of our genetic code, right? Talking about these concepts, I don't just mean examples from objective reality, like the Ukrainian borscht, right? Because you can find anywhere to express that. But I mean things like, this is a nice expression in Ukrainian. It says, there's a blocker. And Ukrainian colleagues will just nodded and smiled, understands what that means. The folks in the audience that don't speak Ukrainian, they look at the English version that says, we were chit-chatting and then we sat down and started crying and they were like, what? So like, there are smiles here and a couple of smiles here, so right? The thing is that this saying is something that Ukrainians say when there were some negotiations, we were talking a lot about something and thought that we were reaching consensus, but then suddenly we realized that it was all in vain, like the consensus will not be reached, disappointed. And that's really to explain what's happening here. But like if any Ukrainian sees this saying at the headline of a newspaper article, then out of this list, they will have this feeling, this understanding, this, saying to information for them. Or like another example, some foreign friends that are learning Ukrainian are wondering, why do Ukrainians like to use the word important? And important to Ukrainian question, yeah? So why do they say, and again, my Ukrainian colleagues here just nodded and smiled. I even got a laugh there, so thank you so much. And thing was that 15 years ago, we had a party that used the slogan campaign. And the importance that this is trying to Ukraine were so ineffective that this word became it started to be hashtag, like hashtag improvement, hashtag покращення on Twitter. Every time someone reported news about changes of doubtful effectiveness. And it's been 15 years ago, but it's still the word got this connotation and it still lives, right? And I linked here an article that is called Charity and Political Disillusionment about the Ukrainian and how it developed. You can look at too. So we established that the language has these concepts and this that we want to preserve, right? Because if the language dies, it dies together with language. And for the language to survive, it's to be present and well represented in the digital world too. Just with us talking here at the conference, for example. So since we're talking about Ukrainian, is Ukrainian present? Is it well represented in the digital world? Is it present in the data sets? Is it present in the tools, starting from machine translation and summarization and coming to text generation assistance? So let's find out. The first and the easiest one we can take to check whether it's present in the digital world is look at Wikipedia. And this is the official statistics of the Wikimedia Foundation from the beginning of this year. Sorted by the number of articles in Wikipedia specific language. And if you look at Ukrainian is actually number 14 out of the 224 Wikipedia languages. It's great, right? Does this mean that our job is done? No. Ukrainian is very represented. That's nice. So many languages, very close to the high resource languages here on the list. But this is just Wikipedia, right? Wikipedia is a specific type of data. Wikipedia is a specific type of text, specific resource, specific topic, specific site of style of writing, and so on. And Ukrainians to writing Wikipedia, to be honest. So let's look at the different research. It's a little bit older. It's from 2021, so it's like 4 years old. This research is called The State and Fate of Linguistic Diversity and Inclusion. It's research, all languages were divided by 6 groups. From the research languages, like the left behinds, going through the scrapers, the hopefuls, the rising stars, the underdogs, the winners. The purple dots that you see here are languages. The size of the gradient circles means the specific group. And the group itself depends on the data and the amount of unlabeled data that is available for a specific language. When we're talking about unlabeled data, you can think of Wikipedia or like the web, so anything you can scrape off the web. When I'm talking about labeled data, it means like data that has some annotations, whether it's linguistic annotations, meaning like you could have parts of speech assigned to specific words, or you can have like extra linguistic annotations like sentiment, emotion, topic of the text, and so on, so other kinds of annotations. Right, and so if you look at the 0, these are the languages that have no labeled data for them at all, right? But they have some unlabeled data. Then data, some labeled data, and then as the labeled data is higher, then the group of the language is also higher. So I think you can find English here. What do you think? Yes, correct. This is English. This paper right here is English. This is the language that has the most labeled data. What do you think is Ukrainian? Let's try the raise of hands. Who thinks Ukrainian is Sweden? Okay. Otherwise, I'm standing here, right? Who thinks Ukrainian is a group 1? Okay. All right. Hands, Vadim. Who thinks Ukrainian is in group 2? Okay, great. Who thinks Ukrainian is in group 3? Okay, nice. Who thinks Ukrainian is in group 4? Okay. Optimistic person. Group 5? No. Okay. So Ukrainian was classified by the group 3 as the rising star. And the rising star means that the language has a strong web presence, with a strong cultural community online for this language. However, these languages have been let down by insufficient efforts in data collection. So this is the description of group 3. And today I'm going to be talking to you about this thriving cultural community, okay, that helped Ukrainian from like at least 1 to 3, something there. A couple more words about where Ukrainian is. According to this research, so the high research languages, Spanish, Japanese, and French, and you can see the gradient circle of the smallest one. So there are just 7 languages in this group, but there are like over 2.5 speakers in the world for this language. Then group 4, the underdogs, Russian, South Korean, and Ukrainian is 3. Indonesians, Southern Africans, Hebrew. So did you get the impression of source-wise Ukrainian was placed? Okay, yeah, good. Everyone's ready. So moving on, but the is that Ukrainian is in the situation. So all languages are, right? But in Ukraine, due to historical reasons, Ukrainian constantly finds itself in competition with another language. Right? Not finds itself in competition. Like English doesn't find itself in competition with other languages. So this is another research from the Ukrainian Center of Content Analysis. They analyzed the Ukrainian segment in different social networks, and they analyzed the ratio of Ukrainian and Russian in the social networks. Ukrainian is marked as red here, and Russian is marked as gray here. And if you look at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, you see these dynamics, like this evolution, these changes in the language landscape that we can observe right now through these changes, right? So in Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, there's a huge leap in the fraction of Ukrainian from between 2020 and 2022. Statistical deviation of this research is 2%, so we can look at this calmly. See that this trend preserves between 2022 and 2023, and then it kind of stabilizes towards 2024. If you look at TikTok and YouTube, the picture is a little bit different. There is a leap in YouTube, again closer to 2023 now, but the ratio is like 50-50. So there are some, these societal situations, challenges that Ukraine finds itself in. Moving forward. I think it's dying, the battery, right? The battery? Yes, okay. Yes, me? Okay, yes. But it's telling me the battery is dying. So, okay. So at the same time, if you're in Ukrainian or trying to search something in Ukraine, you need to find yourself in the similar situation as the people on this slide. So you search for something in Ukraine on YouTube or on Google and still get Russian language content, right? And that is due to some historical reasons, because Google still associates addresses from Ukraine as the location, addresses from the location where Russian language is common. And this is not only about Ukraine, this is about a couple of countries, and like they still haven't fixed this problem. And this brings us to serious ground for manipulation from the Russian side, for example. Last year, from 2024, there was a piece of news that used like the situation with Ukrainian search, saying that Ukrainians made 80% of Google queries in Russian, and our enemy uses language all the time to existence. So that is true. But there's a stop fake organization that fact checked this, and it's really easy to fact check and say, well, it's not true. So it turned out in this fact checking that most of the queries from Ukraine from the occupied territories are Russian. The societal and historical challenges get so what complemented technical challenges. So a lot of people in Ukraine, of course, and the quality of machine translation, for example, for Russian language is better than for Ukrainian language. So if you take this is a simple sentence, I'm writing this matter. The Russian translation is perfect, but the Ukrainian translation is like literally. It says, I'm writing to follow this question, which does the same thing, right? So if there is a bilingual person and you want to use translation for something, you need to translate content or create content, and so it's the better tool, for example, for that. And the better tool would be Russian translation, for example. The fact that Ukrainian is all the time in the competition, which also impacts what the language models do. So here we have a writing from the Ukrainian poetry, and it's like a very famous piece of writing from a very famous Ukrainian author. And then when you ask Gemma who wrote it, Gemma would say this is a beautiful evocative passage from Russian literature, written from the author Alexander Pushkin. And of course, my Ukrainian friends and comments that there's an author here who would be offended if she wrote such a claim. And this means that the current tools, the problem is, the cause of the problem is obvious, because there's data in the lab, there's data that is used to train the models, then Ukrainian data. And it's of the size, but that Ukrainian finds itself in competition with Russian. Which is again creates a problem that to models in educational applications as they are, because we will be hallucinating and creating a lot of disinformation for the students that will be using them. So to sum up my motivation, that is spoken by tens of millions of people and is present in the digital world, but faces multiple challenges, including societal challenges, historical and technical challenges. And that, its course, it's our security, affects our societal changes, future societal changes, and the speed of digitalization too. Because if the quality of data and the quality of tools is not enough, it's really difficult to integrate AI into our governmental technologies, into our education systems, into our defense systems, into our healthcare, and so on and so forth. So that's the motivation why I'm working in Ukraine by night, making Ukraine do. And now let's switch to the evolution of Ukraine. Well, so if you don't mind, we'll take 50 seconds. Hope you're still with me. Good. Well, let's move to the evolution of Ukraine. The first tools for Ukrainian NLP were created these two organizations. So one is ICTERI, this is the Laboratory of Computational Linguistics at the Kyiv National University of Taras Shevchenko, and we have the Ukrainian Language Information Fund at the National Academy of Sciences. And so the Laboratory of Computational Linguistics started creating the first corpora, started annotating these corpora with students. This was mostly linguistic annotation, so speech, syntactic dependencies, and so on. They also created some first corpus management websites so we can browse through the corpus and do some linguistic research. And the linguistic information fund, they created like this huge dictionary, the Dictionary of Ukrainian Language, the Dictionary of Word Change, and so on. That was also accessible through the web browser, and they're working on some corpora too. The problem is that none of these data are available in the format online. You can access through the web browser, but you cannot download this data. You cannot train models with this data. You cannot see this data. And the institutions themselves are pretty closed for collaboration. So, like, if you want to do something to build on this research, you have to be part of this organization. Like, you cannot do this as a community. The community can access this data. So that was a problem for me when I was working on that, and that was a problem for a couple of other people, especially after the Orange Revolution, after the Orange Revolution, after to process data that was left to the government in Ukraine planned. And so we started building the groups in the community. And for the next 2 years, like these 4 groups, and there were many individuals that contributed, right? I'm just listing the that we started building data and tools for Ukrainian language, and it should be as open as possible so that we can process Ukrainian language better. So starting with the blind this group, I was to the founders of the blind group back in 2012, I think, or 2013, and we put this ambitious goal ahead of us to build a 1 million corpus. So, like, a 1 million word corpus at that time sounded like something insane, like 1 million words. And so I wanted to annotate this corpus by part of speech for the Ukrainian language at this online. The second thing we did is we built the first dictionary because there were no dictionaries for the Ukrainian language. The dictionary is called Vadim, Electronic Dictionary of the Ukrainian Language, and it currently has 400,000 words. And if you look, and it can generate all of the word forms because Ukrainian is a collective language, so each word has like 14, each noun has like 14 forms, right? So if you look at all of the word forms, it will be 6 billion word forms right now. And it's available online. Like, anyone can download it. It's really hard. We can work with it. Then what we also did is collect translation dictionaries. These 2 websites, ICTERI-2025 that contain collections of Russian to Ukrainian and English to Ukrainian dictionaries. And also, like, one of the co-founders of the group ICTERI, which is a correction system for Ukrainian. So we continued working on this system. Dictionary helped a lot. And also the to do tokenization for Ukrainian, part of speech tagging for Ukrainian, and so on. So based on statistical at that time, it was like years ago. You can find the results here. And a couple of words about the corpus specifically. So the goal was to collect 1 million words, and the other part of the book just to collect 1 million corpus. By the time, contributions to the corpus. The corpus is genre balanced. There are like texts from 13 different genres, from fiction, from newspapers, from religious texts, from laws, from legislation. Every excerpt to the corpus is there for 2,000 words. So you can think of over 1 million words, and of writing is like 500 to 2,000 words only. Then the corpus was also part of speech tags with the students of the Ukrainian University under the supervision of a sister corps that works at the Ukrainian Catholic University now. It's focused on editing within Ukrainian or modern Ukrainian to 2020. And the corpus also is balanced in terms of geography. So the excerpts from books and newspapers, just examples, just Kiev, not just from the East Ukraine, from the Central Ukraine, from the Southern Ukraine, and so on. So this corpus is available, it's disintegrated, it is to speech tags, and one more that's updated. But like, but it's language. So we founded another group that was called LangUK. And we thought, let's collect data sources. So this group was just 2 of us, like 3 of us, and the principals were volunteering. We spent as much time as we can on this. Open data, everything is due, should be openly published. Democracy. If you decide which programming language to use, basically. And what we do, the corporate dictionaries, embeddings, models, libraries, and collaborations with everyone possible. So what we built, when UK corpus was 1 million words, we built text that was 2 million words, right? So that's like a huge leap. The text corpus is annotated, or it's automatically annotated, not annotated, but it's a corpus that comes from fiction, from websites, from court decisions, because there are also like court decisions, Telegram channels, and so on. So it's also multi-genre, as multi-genre, but it's this corpus is being just went to 2023. In 2023, we joined it with 2 more corpora. So we joined it with Ukrainian News Corpus and Oscar, which is Common Crow, and called this corpus Maluk, this corpus in 2023. And then this year at UNLP, the corpus was presented that is called Kobza, and that one is the biggest one, and Ubertext is part of Kobza too, of course. So the second thing we did, we said, okay, there are no corpora, so the 1K group is working on annotation, so annotating speech, annotating semantical relations now, and methodologies, both like Ukrainian, Surgic, so it's mixed with Russian and so on. So let's focus on something different, and what we focused on was identity recognition. And identities are like names of people, organizations, dates, locations, and so on and so forth. So all of these proper names. And that is very useful to have annotations like these, because you can train a model that can detect organizations in text, and that helps a lot when we do kinds of investigations, like for example, specific deputies that are mentioned in specific news that are related to specific like crimes, for example, and you can do this automatically if you have a model that can like that. And to train this model, you need to have data like this. So we borrowed like some data from the Brown team, and then we created some of the Shiboshi website, which is all about performance agreement, all about like buying and selling and all about like, human connections. And we worked for a couple of years with students together and attended this corporate, making like some kind of published and trained models that were then used like community. One of the contributions that we made is we collected the cave Hong corpus 1551 and then trained models to classify like what it's heating and sparking. Then we built like to Ukrainian translation model. It's better than translate, but it is just DeepL, unfortunately. But DeepL is paid and this one is free. So then we have dictionaries like stress dictionaries, tone dictionaries, so like the list of cars or the list of motorcycles if you want to have them. Then embeddings for Ukrainian fast text flow, so I'm sure but still. It's called GRAC. General for also very big, it's also 2 billion words, same as text. It's not like the download as what the text is. You can access it through the sketch engine, but these texts are these texts contain a lot of metadata. So the texts are starting from 1816. So while UberText and book were corporate that are focused on Ukrainian mostly because we're spreading the this group separation Shvedra collect texts like from everywhere, from time periods. And so we can access them through the sketch engine, which is a browser tool, so we can download the data, but you can do all kinds of research like this. So you can check, for example, the dynamics of feminine occupational titles, because like feminitors have added to the so you can actually, this is the only resource that we can use to see the trends of word usage throughout the time, and all kinds of stuff. Another thing that the group did, although they didn't publish all of the data, because the data is protected by intellectual property and so on, they can publish texts that are older than 70 years, right? And so they publish this data on GitHub, and the corpus is called, and this corpus is 50 and every year, and intellectual property to text that are older than 70 years, this corpus will be updated. So this corpus is already become useful because there's a huge multilingual child's corpus about like which language contributors like child that learns this language should know at a certain age. So you can become the foundation to this child's corpus that is multilingual. Also, I was working on that helped with machine translation. This project is called Pararuk, and they built the syntactic corpus. This is Ukrainian corpus based on parliamentary speech, because this is also data, right? And another thing that I want to mention is that University of Ukrainian. They also collected the corpus that is called Zoloto, Zoloto Gold, and they collected data from different sources and then they treated with students speech and also syntactic dependencies. This corpus is also available for processing language. So you can syntactic trees for Ukrainian. So the difference between what was happening in 2020 and what has happened in the next decade was that, first of all this data is possible. And second of all these 4 groups have been actively collaborating with one another. So the has become the foundation that validated. Donated data to the block system, so you can use it for to do dynamics. So you can actually not just for a specific word, but for the value of this word, which means that you can of this word in terms, right? Throughout the time. The basic dictionary, the 400,000 word dictionary that is online, became the basis for annotating this corpus of universal institute. Academy of Sciences at that time, but it was Ukrainian. So, after what happened next? First of all, as I mentioned, like this group it brings a lot of languages and Ukrainian because we have American corpus, because we have some tendencies, and because we have also tendencies. Created the dictionary to dictions too. But space is another has Ukraine too. So there's for example television channel with over 1,500 people that are interested in started publishing Ukrainian, and we found there these workshop, like a main conference that is that specializes specifically in processing. And then also just a couple of shared tasks are competitions, and I'm going to tell you also about how this shared task impact the development of Ukraine for Ukrainian. So moving to why did we need a separate workshop for Ukrainian language processing? There's an association for computational linguistics, for example, that is 63 years old, that has been publishing all possible languages, mostly English, but all possible languages are welcome. Why did we need a separate workshop for Ukrainian specifically? That is because Ukrainians, if you search through the ACL anthology through all 63 years, you won't find much data on Ukraine. Like, there's a huge gap between this international audience, between this international and Ukraine. The most of the dogs do searching garages, something like that. So, I wanted to establish this workshop and co-locate this workshop with big conferences so that we can share, we can exchange the experience, we can promote data tools for Ukraine to the international community. So we can encourage our enthusiasts that are data tools the interest to actually just put the so that it becomes visible and to increase the visibility of the community. So this is a short history of UNLP. The first UNLP happened at ICTERI in 2021 in Kherson. And happened so we're co-located with lunch and conferences like ACL with ACL. ACL happened in this year and it was like this conference. And like 150 workshops applied to ACL and only 29 were accepted. And to us, like it's a huge event. It was huge. In terms of attendance, so the first year we had like a very robust attendance. The other 3 UNLPs were around 100 people every year. Or you see it happened in summer, which is a blame summer for the small UNLP here. To share some about acceptance rates. So the first year we just 13 papers and 5 were accepted, and we can see that the number of submitted papers is rising. The acceptance rate was quite high for the past 2 years, and I think this is mostly because I was personally chasing every person who did something useful to the Ukrainian, telling them to write the paper, instructing them how to write a paper and so on. And then this year, but we got 41 submissions to the conference, like super happy such a niche workshop got so many submissions, and 20 were accepted to be published at UNP. And the publication is the ACL ontology, which is also indexed in this corpus. In terms of impact, so telling them to write papers. So I haven't mentioned this corpus, but it's a corpus for collections that was also published in mine. And after the publication, it got 46 citations in 2 years. The intertext represents a corpus that already existed at the first time, and then presented this paper. It started cited, we got 41 citations in 2 years. And we had the corpora too. We started getting citations, we started tracking what's happening with this data. This is another research by Mariana Romanyshyn that she shared this year. So this is the number of Scopus publications that mention Ukrainian language, mention processing the Ukrainian language. Doesn't mean that they focus specifically on the Ukrainian language. This can also papers that cite some work on language processing. And this is only with English, right? Because so it doesn't include Ukrainian language papers, right? So, and you can see that the until the past decade. So, and then here you can see like the rise of publications, and you see that we were happy to say that you contributed to that, and Ukrainian started to it's not to say that, but the first Keynote actually the use of Ukraine, because there are a lot of Ukrainian refugees that interested in developing this. So you see the impact there too. Goals was to increase the collaboration, and I'm happy to say that for the past 2 years, in feedback form and for future collaboration, which is great. And when I say collaborations, is not just among community, but the industry started contributing to the Ukraine to so the impact of under the pressure of community, I guess, but still. So, for example, in 2020, Scan company and the speaker Scan as a speaker team. So the publishing for both commercial and non-commercial use, so license, and this model became a foundation for classifiers for Ukrainian language. Then we published interesting 1,000 sentences that were manually annotated by expert linguists. So the company spent money on building this corpus, and the company used this corpus for most commercial use. Then it's the specifically to perform 4 kinds of tasks. So these were like editing tasks, like correcting errors, like and some other tasks. In 2024, I'm going to use the part, of course, because I work in both places. So the Union company, which is the Ukrainian place, provided data set, and it says the data set for the 4 years of anonymized resumes and vacation and job openings, and they're in both English and Ukrainian. And this became the foundation. This became the foundation for expecting hiring biases in the large language models. So you can see the large language model, the job, and doesn't say you should hire this person or not. But if you should modify the resume, so it doesn't change. But if you say that it came from just actions, like does it change it? Does LLM change it? Response or not? Then the Mokva published the release just so all of this was published for both commercial use. Still was also part of the social media corpus that we used for shared tasks that I'm going to talk about. This one is published for commercial use only. So the other ones have open licenses. Then what UNLP also helped us do is fill in the gaps. So we knew that Ukrainian NLP lacks high quality label data set, focuses on standard Ukrainian, as you saw, like the codes. So there's poor coverage of like dialects, studio code switching, and so on. It focuses on the general domain, focuses on written text, and so on. So we UNLP became a platform where we started discussing these gaps, and every year we see published on these topics. So like this year we had the first multimodal benchmark for Ukrainian, actually in 2 of them. Picture of a dish and the description of this dish, and it's called Yuri Cuisine. You can use it, which is published. For example, in dialects, this year at UNLP, we had a paper called Style, and Style was the first research on adapting a large language model to the regional dialect of the Ukrainian language. That never happened before. It's also open together with the data set. Switching. We have an amazing student talking about the code switching, changing languages back and forth in the Ukrainian parliament. How do our deputies use Ukrainian and Russian? Like when they're angry, they switch to Russian, for example. And their legislation, they switch to Ukrainian because they don't know how to say it in Russian. So here's one. So we to trends, right? One thing that we see is surging data generation. So generating, we have a lack of data, right? As we'll see, well, no. So to do is see the papers that started using it for synthesizing data that they have been using for English for quite some time. And this include like generating data with large language models, because large language models become smarter, so to say, but like building the whole pipelines of distilling generated synthetic data for Ukraine, substitution, using all kinds of data aggregation. Like for example, so that the student did was gender swap in Ukrainian. So she works as a doctor, she works as a doctor, English doctor is the same in the and teaching the rest of the sentence. So we build a model that can do that. And gender swapping from whole text, for example, we can open data, we can get data gender balanced, right? You know, like there's see an interesting responsible AI this year. 3 years. Responsible first ethical data sets for Ukrainian. These were translated data sets from English, but this is just a start. So like next year, when the student is over, specific ethical data set that is adapted to our cultural and historical conditions. We also see the teachings of large language models, and we see a huge impact of shared tasks. So let me talk a little bit more about shared tasks. I hope I have you. Now, okay. So in 2023, we launched a shared task on grammatical error correction for Ukrainian, and we used this grammar corpus as the data. We had 2 tracks to GC grammatical error correction, just correcting grammar, and GC plus fluency correcting grammar and fluency of language. So, like for example, correcting correct use of discourse markers, so to say, and idioms. And we had 16 registered teams from Ukrainian and Ukrainian US, and as an impact, we had a list of open source solutions and data, because people also generated data for Ukrainian grammatical error correction. Another impact is that after teams published their resources, from Swedish university that was launching the ICTERI-2025 share task. And this share task was about correcting grammatical errors in 12 languages, and they invited Ukraine because they saw that we did that already, we have the data. And so we took this corpus, which was formed to this share task, and and the results were just published at the beginning of this year. Last year, we launched a share task, a risky one, fine-tuning large language models for Ukraine. I thought it was not possible sources as well for even specifically to that. Let it share task, but still we did it. And we have data to test the large language models. So we had to be creative. And what we did, we created 2 data sets to test the quality of the models editors. We scraped the 0, which are exam tasks for Ukrainian. We scraped them all for Ukrainian language, literature, and history for the past 4 years. And we created like
Second left.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you so much. So we scraped Zeno for the 4 years and formed the development test data set for to test the large language models. And another thing we did, we created 100 of open-ended questions for large language models to answer. And they were categorized and they were like manually created by myself and a friend of mine. And these were questions from like questions about like tell me a children's tale, and then the model should tell the children's tale or interpret this poem of Jadal, or like questions about Pes Patron and about like other cultural phenomena in Ukrainian, or like tasks to rewrite something, to add humor somewhere, to check the sentiment of something, and so on. And only models with open models were allowed here so that the competition is fair. And we had 22 registered teams from Ukraine, the US, and Romania. And actually, the team from Romania, from the company Adobe, won the competition. So they built the best large language model in Ukrainian language at that time, which was amazing. The impact was that all of the teams, so all the conditions for all the competitions is that the solutions should be open source, right? So we got a list of open source solutions and data for Ukrainians. We got new benchmarks because like, so we built these 2, but the competition inspired other researchers to build more benchmarks for large language models. And we got like 2 more Zeno-based data sets in complement to ours in the next year. And the evaluation benchmark, which had like really interesting tasks. So it would give the model a children's tale and have like gaps and say like which characters from this tale are missing in these specific gaps. Or like this is the news from Ukrainian Pravda, and here are like 10 titles, so pick the correct headline for this specific news article. So this is a really cool benchmark for natural language understanding of large language models. And the ideas of solving Ukrainian LLMs actually also brewed at this shared task. And we'll talk about large language models too. So this year, the shared task was on detecting social media manipulation. And we used the data set that was provided by Text.QA, our partner. And they manually labeled 9,500 Telegram posts by 10 different manipulation strategies. And these are different manipulation strategies, like this can be strategies like euphoria. So someone says, Putin died, and this is a catchy article. Or like things, manipulations in the news that you can see all the time, like a lot of sentiment and so on. And we had 2 tracks, technique classifications, which was a multi-label classification task, because one piece of news can have a couple of manipulation strategies, and spam detection, like detecting the exact text fragment that contains manipulation. And we get more than 50 registered teams from Ukraine and supposedly Bangladesh. So this shared task, one of the professors at the Southeastern University of Bangladesh saw this shared task and gave it to his students. And you get like 7 teams from, out of these 50 plus, 7 teams from Bangladesh competing and trying to solve manipulation detection in media. We have a couple of open source solutions from these teams. We have 5 papers on this topic published at UNLP, and we're looking forward to see the impact, because as you understand, the impact is delayed a little bit. So I hope that next year we will have like more disinformation detection tools that can be used, because these ones, the quality, I really want the quality to be a little bit higher. So but this happens every year. So in a year, I hope we'll see a better impact. Moving on to large language models. Yes. So the first attempts, like, do large language models speak Ukrainian? Well, to a limit, so to say. A bit of history. The first attempts to build large language models started from GPT-2 based models for Ukrainian. You can check Ermolayev from 2020, but like this is already considered technology, so to say, right? Then in 2023, Unicorn built Alpaca based on Llama. This was Llama fine-tuned for Ukrainian. This was a huge thing, a huge release. And a lot of tools were based on Alpaca. In 2024, right when we reached the shared task on fine-tuning large language models for Ukrainian, the ARA company, Cohere, the ARA model by Cohere explicitly includes Ukrainian. So ARA 1-on-1 means that it includes 101 languages, and Ukrainian was one of them. So they actually found Ukrainian experts, annotated some data, some instructions for large language models for Ukrainian, and included Ukrainian. And we asked Sebastian Weaver, who was one of the developers of ARA, to UNLP, so he was speaker this year. He moved to Llama, to Meta already, so he works on Llama 4, but he was one of the developers of and shared his experience at UNLP. And this year we got Mamai LM, which is also, which is currently the state of the art for the Ukrainian large language model. So if you need a Ukrainian speaking large language model, check Mamai LM, it's openly released. It was built by Hanna Yukhamenko in collaboration with Insight, which is a Bulgarian institute. So they had the compute to do this, and it's based on Gemma. Yeah, and you can see like 3 dots here because there's a lot of stuff that is brewing. But first, what I want to tell you is the experience we got from building the first large language models for Ukrainian. So let's talk about issues and some potential solutions. The first issue is tokenization. So tokenization is the way the large language model segments the text to process it, right? And it impacts the context, like how many, because context can that the large language model can process and output contains like X tokens. So the better is tokenization, right? The longer are the tokens, the more tokens, the more text you can fit into the context, right? The tokenization also impacts the cost, because usually the cost is estimated in computation, in like number of tokens and so on, and the time of processing. So all of these things are impacted by tokenization. And if you look, this is a screenshot from the GPT official tokenizer, OpenAI's tokenizer, and you can see that we have an English text and a Ukrainian text, and this is I believe, the excerpt from the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And we have the same number of characters here, but the number of tokens is 2.5 times larger in Ukrainian. That means that Ukrainian is 2.5 times more costly to process, right? What we did, so we took our Maluk corpus that I mentioned before with UberText and Common Crawl and so on, and we took tokenizers from different popular and open sourced large language models, and we tokenized this corpus with these tokenizers from these models, just to estimate like how different these tokenizers are. And so the IA Expanse model, which is the next generation IA model that included Ukrainian in the training, produces 20 billion tokens on the loop. But then, for example, Microsoft Phi 4 produces almost 40 billion tokens on Maluk. So the difference in computation, in the context, and in the cost would be like twice as large, right? And we can see that Llama and Gemma are like not bad, actually. So Gemma is a good choice to train Ukrainian. What could be the solution? It would be good to adapt the tokenizer, meaning to expand the vocabulary of the tokenizers of large language models to the Ukrainian language better. And the first adaptations are already open sourced also by members of the community. This is the work of Bogdan Didenko. It's called III, because it's an adaptation of the IA Expanse tokenizer, which we saw was the best at tokenizing Ukrainian. And we adapted it to Ukrainian based on the Maluk corpus. You can already also use it for your tools. Another issue that we see in large language models for Ukrainian is that they switch to English. So we saw a lot of examples like these in the shared task. Here, the model is generating something in Ukrainian, the answer to the question, and then it inserts the word regular, for example, right? And it's in English, okay? And it's not surprising because most of the data that is fed into large language models is in English. There's a tweet from Enrique Pata saying that training data set of Llama 3, for example, is 95% English, with only 5% left for all other languages, right? And another thing we saw is that it doesn't only insert English, sometimes it inserts Russian, and it may switch to Russian words. The models may start producing Russian characters at certain points and so on. And we even have a phenomenon in Ukrainian. It's called Azirivka, based on one of our previous prime ministers that could not learn Ukrainian and that produced this kind of language all the time. So it's a legitimate way to speak for large language models now. How do we solve it? We need more data. We need more data to be present in the pre-training data sets of the language models because it's a competition, unfortunately. And so this is the statistics from the largest corpus as of now, presented just a month ago. The corpus is called COBZA. There's a paper about it, and it already includes UberText 2.0 that I mentioned before, and this corpus is 60 billion tokens. So these are 60 billion LLM tokens, not like 2 billion words that I said about UberText. So it's a little bit less in words specifically, but it's still a lot. So this is 7 times bigger than the Maluk corpus, for example, that was the largest one before. Again, published months ago, open sourced, you can use it, it's in Hugging Face. Yep. Okay. Yeah, right. Sorry. Yes. Another issue that we saw, like in different models that were used in the shared task, because people fine-tuned Gemma, fine-tuned Mistral, fine-tuned Llama, so they tried different models. The models hallucinate a lot. They hallucinate historical facts, dates, figures, people, and so on. So, for example, this one of my favorite examples when the model was asked, what is the oldest educational institution in Ukraine? And the model hallucinated the name of the educational institution, the city, the year it was established, and even people that lived and worked there. It all looks believable, right? So if someone who doesn't history would read this, they would actually believe that there's a city Hiroshima in Ukraine, right? But so which makes it dangerous for these models to be used in the raw state for education and other internal purposes and external purposes. Another thing that we see in the models is all kinds of disinformation, propaganda, and bias. And here I want to quote a very good piece of research by TextLQA, our partners, that was just released, I think, 2 weeks ago or something like that. So this research is about detecting how much Russian propaganda do large language models contain. The developers created 2,803 questions in 10 different dimensions about Ukraine in English, in the English language. And the answers that they, for each question, they gave like 4 different answers from Ukrainian friendly to Russian propaganda. And they asked 27 open large language models of different size from 3 billion parameters to 30 billion parameters to pick one of the answers for each of these 2,000 questions. So here's what we found. I'm not going to post the whole research. There's a link here. You can read it in full if you're interested. So what we found is that the most Ukrainian-friendly models are actually the ones that contain Ukrainian explicitly in the training. So again, this IA models from Cohere. And also the Microsoft 5.4 models, they contain the largest amount of pro-Ukrainian or Ukrainian-friendly answers. So this would be like 30 to 40% on average. And you can see like Russian propaganda is in red here. And then Western neutrality is in beige. Then there are some other models that contain the least number of Ukrainian-friendly answers. We have DeepSeek, so Chinese models, and we have some US models, so another version of Phi and Google's Gemma model. And we can see like that the Chinese model is the most, as we say, censored. So this gray region here is like no answer. So the model just refuses to answer, right? This one is the most censored. But then like if we look at Gemma, again, the amount of Russian propaganda is still really big. Give it a minute. Yes. The most common, they found that the most common type of bias is Western neutrality. So you saw a lot of beige there, right? That is the most common type of answer. And Russian propaganda is most often mentioned in the dimensions of history, geopolitics, and national identity. So these would be answers that deny the existence of Ukraine and Ukrainian language and Ukrainian culture and nature, nation. These would be things like the Russia had a legitimate reason to attack Ukraine because it was in terms of their security and they didn't want Ukraine to join NATO, and that's a legitimate reason, and so on and so forth. So all of this rhetoric is like really dangerous for Ukraine and for Ukrainian language. Also, when it's embedded in the open source large language models. I think it's dying. So what's next? And my last part of the presentation. Do I still have time? Yes. So my last part of the presentation will be about AI sovereignty, because this is where the Ukraine is heading right now, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen the claims and announcements of the Ministry of Digital Transformation. So nations are currently racing to achieve this AI sovereignty. It's not only about Ukraine. Like when we say AI sovereignty, I mean the capacity to develop and deploy AI using our own infrastructure and using our own data and talent. And this gives nations digital independence, economics, competitiveness, and AI adoption. And countries are doing it in a very different way. Like if we're talking about the US, or South Korea, or nations that have a lot of resources, they do this independently. If we're talking about Europe, Europe also relies on the shared pool of resources a lot, for example. And in Ukraine, we can also do it in a different way. Why do sovereign LLMs, for example? Ensuring that AI can speak your language is one of the key pillars of AI sovereignty. It can help us preserve cultural and linguistic identity, something that I started my presentation with. It can ensure operational autonomy, like if you have any kinds of export restrictions, for example, which like happened in Ukraine a couple of times already. It can ensure strategic autonomy in terms of we can control the data that we use for training these models. It can enable localization, integration of these models in healthcare, in defense, in educational system, and so on, and drive innovation. And there are multiple strategies that you can use. Like it doesn't mean, when I'm saying about talking about sovereign LLMs, it doesn't mean that you have to build everything from scratch, right? Because that would take a lot of resources and a lot of time. It doesn't mean to build everything from scratch. It can mean customize or fine-tune some of the existing models. It can mean work with model developers, with Google, with Cohere, with other model developers to supply them with enough data that we can control this data, to ensure inclusion of this data in training, and we can ensure domestic demand with for localized solutions. We can build a lot of stuff locally, and like the current strategy of Ministry of Digital Transformation would be to build locally a lot of stuff. And if you're interested about how other nations are already doing it and how Ukraine can do it, about where other nations get finances, about where they get expertise, how the governments collaborate with private institutions and educational institutions and research institutions, I encourage you to read this report that we published at the beginning of this year. It's about several large language models, advantages, strategies, and regulations. And it's like a 30-something pages long report, but it should be quite interesting for you to read if this is the topic of your interest. And so where we are right now. With over a decade of building the community of tools and data and resources that I was talking about, we already have enough expertise. We have enough general purpose data, but we still lack a lot of domain-specific data, a lot of high-quality labeled data for specific tasks. So, and the community is working on this, and the educational institutions are working on that. In terms of regulations, we still have zero legislation in Ukraine on whether you can or cannot use the protected data for training your models. And the Ministry of Digital Transformation is working, like they have the whole pool of lawyers that are working on updating the legislation so that we have some clarity about what can and cannot be used. In terms of guardrails, so I mentioned the interest in responsible AI in some of the first ethical data sets that are published, but we are just at the beginning. We don't have an organizers for Ukrainian, we don't have alignment for the models, and we don't have Ukrainian-specific ethical data sets, and we don't even have enough recommendation guidelines, so to say, at the governmental level. So to sum up, we're not there yet, but we're getting there, I'd say. Thank you so much for your attention.
And this is the substitute for you. Yeah. And this is for you guys.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very insightful talk and great insights from your work. And thank you for your work. In addition to those insights, it's really impressive to see how much effort has been done to boost this this availability of data sets, the openness of them, and the increased corpora that you have also generated online. I have one comment, and I want to ask about your insights on that perspective as well. You mentioned that the data existence and data availability influences a lot the outputs of large language models, for example, among other models that are trained to do certain tasks, sentiment analysis, etc., etc. There are strategies followed for training those large language models, including, for example, counteracting hate speech, as an example. And there are rules and regulations done algorithmically to actually remove this data before including it in training the model so that we can counteract the effect. So talking about misinformation, do you think the availability of data that is correct, curated, Ukraine-friendly, like you mentioned, would be sufficient to actually prevent large language models from being a source of generating this misinformation? Or do we need to take action on a strategic level on the decisions that companies and big tech are taking to actually remove this misinformation, specifically in contexts of conflict, context of war, and context of large-scale misinformation like we have between the Russian language and the Ukrainian language? So based on your experience, to which extent does data availability help? And where should we start thinking of regulating the strategies for training those models? Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a very good and a very complex question, like a very complex question. The problem is that we're just at the start. Like this year, we launched this competition on manipulation detection. We did a panel discussion on disinformation detection. We're trying to find some tools, and they're just to do this preventative, detection of propaganda so that it's not included in the data sets. But the quality of tools is not satisfactory yet, so to say. Then in terms of including the data, we have some ongoing experiments with fine-tuning GEMMA for the Ukrainian language, adding more and more like Ukrainian-friendly data. And we check how the responses of GEMMA change with more and more data that we add. So it definitely helps. But like I cannot say that it will prevent future cases. That's the reason. Because the situation is even more complex with Russia creating the whole website that is called Pravda, that has like Russian propaganda translated into multiple European languages. And this data is openly published, and they do this intentionally so that this data is included in the training data. So like it's an ongoing battle. It's not something that we can solve by, including more Ukrainian data just once and so on. I don't have a solution for that, unfortunately. I think we're just at the beginning of this road.
Thanks for your talk at the beginning. So, like, can I get some more time from you or from you both?
Of course.
Because I have 4 technical questions from your presentation. Okay, is it okay? Can I get some more time?
Yeah. Topic breaks.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Technical discussion.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Okay, at the beginning, I would like to mention that in your presentation, you talk about Bangladesh, and there are one university from Southeast University. I would be happy to share that I'm also from Bangladesh originally, but now,
Nice.
yeah, now I am working in Germany as a postdoc or research group lead, whatever you want to say. And you also mentioned Southeast University, as I remember correctly, and I would like to share that the vice president now in the Southeast University is my direct teacher or mentor. So I would be happy that you mentioned.
So nice.
Okay, now I move in the technical part. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so you are talking about the synthetic data, if I understand correctly or remember correctly. So you mentioned that you also face problem to generate synthetic data in some point of view, and also from my point of view is why you didn't consider to generate the synthetic data as a reasoning task. For reasoning task.
Reasoning. Yes, we are generating synthetic data for reasoning. It's not published yet. It's work in progress.
Yeah, okay, great. And also you mentioned about the domain-specific data, because you says that there is a lackings of the domain-specific data in the Ukrainian language. So I would want to mention that there is one paper from this year from Google DeepMind that says the best practice and lesson for learn on the synthetic data for the large language model. And they also mention about that how can we consider this language task or generate the synthetic data in as a reasoning task, and try to generate the data as verify as we can. So they use it in mathematics and physics and some other complex domain, but they also mention that it's also possible to apply in other domain. So I think it's a good way that we can see the synthetic data generation and move forward.
Yes. Well, synthetic data generation is a great way to start when you have zero data. And I think there was a very nice talk yesterday about generating license plates. It's also about when you have zero data and you need to start somewhere. But also, as Nadia mentioned yesterday, synthetic data does not replace real world data because it's still an approximation. I agree that it's a good way to start when you have zero, right? But I'd still say that in parallel, you should, we as a community should develop more domain-specific data too. Right now, we're looking at some mathematical data sets for the Ukrainian language, also to train and test the large language models. There are a lot of resources, but they are not compiled into data sets, and you have to reach out to the owners of these data sets and negotiate and do stuff like that. So I'd say it's a parallel effort, but yeah. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks. The second point is you are talking about the context window, if I understand correctly, because you mentioned that in English, they have the low context window, and in Ukrainian language, you have to be considered the bigger context window because of the cost and everything, because the token is getting increases of the word size and everything, if I understand correctly, because I don't understand.
It's not about the word size, it's more about that in English, you would have one token would be about one word, right? So to say, in Ukrainian, since there's little data in the pre-training data, when these BP tokenizers were trained, Ukrainian would be tokenized almost at the character level. So this would be 1-2 characters. And when you get more Ukrainian data into the training set, you can have tokenizers that have half of the Ukrainian word, of the full Ukrainian word as a token. And so you have fewer tokens in your text, in general, which impacts the cost and the context window and the computational time.
Yeah, okay, thanks. And the third point is the hallucination that you mentioned in your talk, why you didn't use verified data as the wiki data or for history or some other things in the training process or fine-tuning process, because that will help to understand the language model more deeper about the history or the verified text, I would say, and reduce the hallucination. So why
Wikipedia was definitely included in the training data of most of the competitors from the shared task. But since these are not, I was talking in the context of hallucination, I was talking about what we saw in the outputs of the models of the shared task competitors. So I personally, or our group of organizers, did not have impact on that because that would be unfair, right? It's a fair competition. So Wikipedia, we already have Ukrainian Wikipedia in multiple corpora, and it was included. But still, you can see these kinds of hallucinations, which means that it's still not enough, right?
Okay, and last point, sorry.
Sure.
So you are talking a lot about fine-tuning, if I understand correctly. And but I would say that fine tuning can sometimes misinterpret the text in a point. And like the other point of view is like it will increase a lot of models because it's the task specific things, and sometimes it's quite difficult to manage this type of language models because there are a lot and you need to handle them. And sometimes so why you didn't consider the teacher student strategy, because you can take this and just
we are right now. Also not published, also work in progress. Again, like this is what I was sharing is the competition we launched right in the last year, and then we looked at the results of this competition, and right now there's another ongoing research where we're using these learnings and doing exactly what you're saying, like translate synthetic mode data for reasoning, using teacher student, and using this new corpus that was published just a month ago. So like Ukrainian does lag behind English a little bit, so we still need some more time to adapt the new techniques.
What about the GRPO or some low resource or low cost training process?
Okay, we can continue at the coffee break. Thank you so much for your questions. It's very interesting.
Just a second.
Your question. First of all, my sincere gratitude for your incredible research and for your effort for fighting against Ukrainian language genocide, which we faced a lot of centuries. And I'm sure that Ukrainian language is the pillars of our national identity and for great tools for commemoration practice, for decommunization practice. And that's why my question, not technical, because I'm not professional in linguistics or in ICT, but I would like to ask you about what we can facilitate, what we can support your work in Ukrainian language, natural language processing in non-academic, in not professional academic sphere, in non-linguistic sphere. Now I propose make my request, for example, professional request in internet or in AI model in English. And also I'm sharing my research in English. Maybe it's wrong path.
No, I think it's okay to share your research in English and to use English whenever you want, but it doesn't mean that we have to neglect developments for the Ukrainian language just because we want the language to survive and we want it to know the terminology, to be able to speak at any topic with us and so on and so forth. Like, I think it's totally okay to use English. It doesn't mean that I don't want Ukrainian to be in competition with English. I also don't want Ukrainian to be in competition with Russian, right? But to your first question, how you can contribute in a non-academic way. So since you work at the university, a lot of data passes through you, and the data is key to any developments. So for example, if you have students writing essays in Ukrainian, and you have teachers, for example, grading these essays, if you can get, when you receive essays from students, if they can sign off that you can use whatever essay I wrote externally, like for any use, you can, as a university, you can collect a corpus of this kind of data, and this corpus will be very useful for any kind of research for the Ukrainian language for processing. So think about that. There are multiple countries actually do that already. At Grammarly, we licensed corpora for example, from the Singaporean university, because they collect this data from the students, and they can then sell this data for the university's benefit, for example. I can take more questions. Thank you.
Okay, first, thank you so much for this outstanding, tremendous work you presented, really.
It's not just me, just for clarity, right? People were
Presenting.
Yeah.
Questions, but let's stick to one. All these resources are open sourced and can be freely used. I'm pretty sure, for example, Russians are actively using all these resources to train their models to fake Ukrainian news, messages, and so on and so on. Of course, they have much more resources than we, unfortunately, still. And what to do with this?
That's a good question, and we haven't seen any usage of that. Like theoretically, it does sound logical, but we haven't used any maluse of this data at this size till now. And I think it's connected to the fact that Russians deny the existence of the Ukrainian language in the first hand. So why should they even bother?
As a nation, yeah.
Yeah, why should they even bother, generating stuff in Ukrainian? But yeah, well, maluse of any data set is always a possibility. But I think the benefit of open sourcing this data outweighs the potential disadvantages.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for brilliant presentation. The question is, don't you think that the single real source for expanding Ukrainian language all over the world is active collaboration with Ukrainian diasporas all over the world? Because diasporas are inserted in associated surroundings, and they will also take part in this process. Thank you.
The short answer is yes. And one of the goals of UNLP, of the UNLP workshop that we've been doing for the 3 years, is to get impact from Ukrainians that are in the US, that are in Germany, that are in the UK, that are in France. And we have these papers that we published at UNLP, and this research and these collaborations, they happen all over the world. So it's not just people in Ukraine, it's not just people in Kyiv and Lviv that come there, and it's not just people from Kharkiv and Kherson that come there. These are people that are all over the world. And this is a good platform for them to collaborate and to publish and to exchange work. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was very interesting from different sides to see your work. It's very interesting, diversity and very applied. And I would like to ask such question. When we use, for example, Grammarly, during one time per 2 weeks, for example, we have some tone of voice for our texts which we translated or verified. And I would like to ask you, what do you think about tone of voice? How it impact on context of training models, and does it important for representatives of text, and how it can be used for training models?
Yeah, thank you so much for your question. I think in terms of the Ukrainian language, we're a little bit far from adapting to the people's tone and voice. But like if we take this question to the general domain. So yes, it's a well-known flaw of large language models that the generated text sounds more robotic. And there are multiple ways in which you can tackle that. So, for example, at Grammarly, we do try to mimic your voice, but at the same time, we don't want to mimic your voice by collecting all of the data that you have ever written, storing it somewhere, and using it, and so on. So we are collecting features about how you write, and then we inject this feature into the generations at the generation stage. So I wouldn't say that adding this kinds of data at the pre-training stage would be a good solution right now. It wouldn't be a scalable solution, but like at the generation stage, if you can instruct your model to mimic your voice better, to ingest some excerpts of your writing and store the features of your writing in a smart way, then that can help. Yeah. Yes, it's like a subtype of personalization. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. More questions, please. Okay. Like a chance for me.
Okay.
You spoke about shared tasks, which are nice, but I would love to see something a little bit more higher in semantics. Are you still thinking about extending your shared tasks portfolio? What about having a shared task for general terminology recognition?
That's a great idea. Do you have a data set for that?
I have some, yeah.
Okay, let's collaborate. That can be the next shared task for UNLP.
That was the proposal, to start a coffee break with this very nice discussion. Is the coffee break ready? Yes, but before the coffee break, I would like to extend my happiness and thanks to our speaker.
Thank you so very much for coming here and for spending this hour and a half with me.
Oh, indeed, it was a very good start of a second day. Thank you very much. Coffee is waiting for you.